Today's episode has been brought to you by OfferingTree. I have some news to share with you, connected yoga teachers, about OfferingTree, which I will do in a little bit. But for now, I want to tell you that if you are a yoga teacher who's doing anything at all online, let's say you're building a website, you're hosting a membership, you're uploading your yoga videos, you're teaching on Zoom, or you're collecting payments or waivers from your yoga students, make sure to check out OfferingTree, because this all-in-one online software can make your life a lot easier. I use and love OfferingTree, and I also really appreciate that this is a company that cares about and is listening to yoga teachers. And honestly, their software is the best that I have found, and I have tried many through the years as a yoga teacher. Also, something really cool, because OfferingTree sponsors our podcast, is they are giving all of our podcast listeners, that's you, a really great discount code. So if you want to check this out, head on over to offeringtree.com/Shannon to get the discount. Today's episode is also brought to you by Pelvic Health Professionals. This is the other hat I wear other than podcasting for yoga teachers. It's an online membership for yoga teachers, PTs, movement educators, healthcare professionals, really anyone who wants to learn more about pelvic health so that they can show up to support the people that they're working with who have a pelvis. In there, we hire guest experts each and every month to teach us the most up-to-date information. You get to attend calls live or catch the replay and get your questions answered in real time. Visit pelvichealthprofessionals.com to sign up. Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. My pronouns are she, her, hers. This podcast is being recorded on Anishinaabeg, Odawa, and Mississauga land, also called the Bruce Peninsula in Ontario, Canada. And if you are new here, you might not know that I'm also a mom of 3, a yoga teacher, and the founder of Pelvic Health Professionals. If you are a returning listener, you know how it goes around here. This podcast was created for you, the yoga teacher, so that each and every week you are connected to the information and ideas that are going to support you as you are building and growing your yoga business. Because I get what it feels like. I know that when I left yoga teacher training and I jumped out into the world of teaching and running a yoga business, it really at times felt very overwhelming, especially when we're trying to navigate new learnings, unlearning things, learning new things, and trying to take out harmful messages that might be built into the health and wellness industry. One of those harmful messages that we get in the broader health and wellness spaces, and also just out in the world existing as a human, is diet culture. We've talked about this on the podcast before. We've talked about how we can look at how diet culture is showing up in our yoga spaces and how we can take it out. A great episode to go back to is episode 292 with Jessica Grossman and Alyssa Toomey. And this week, we're going to dig in even further about how can we take diet culture out of Ayurveda, because a lot of yoga teachers learn about Ayurveda and might bring that into their classes. And so I think it's a really important conversation that we are having about how to make sure that diet culture isn't showing up if we're talking about Ayurveda. Now, we've done some other episodes on Ayurveda, a really recent one, 303, Ayurveda for Better Digestion with Mona Warner. Episode 248, Ayurveda is all about self-care with Shara Carruthers. And episode 128, Ayurveda, Doshas, and Yoga with Angela Glass. I'll make sure that we link to all of those in the show notes in case you're wondering, hey, how can I learn more about Ayurveda in general? But today we're digging deep into how diet culture is actually showing up in Ayurveda and what we can do about it. And I'm so excited that you get to hear from Diane Finlayson, who is an amazing yoga teacher and educator. So Diane has been educating yoga teachers, therapists, Ayurvedic and meditation facilitators for over 20 years. She recently retired from the Maryland University of Integrative Health as the department chair for Yoga Therapy and Ayurveda. And before that, Diane had 3 yoga studios, ran 200 and 300-hour yoga teacher trainings and Ayurveda trainings, as well as meditation trainings for 15 years. Diane also serves the recovery community in her private practice. My goodness, I could have talked to her all day, and I'm so excited that you get to meet her and have a listen to our conversation. When we talked, Diane shared more about the definition and categories of Ayurveda, how colonization has impacted Ayurveda, and the differences in practice between North America and India, and also the scope of practice when it comes to Ayurveda. You all know, if you've been listening for a while, that I love to talk about scope of practice. And I want to say that, especially in this episode, you are listening in real time, me asking the questions that I wish that I would have asked, or someone would have been asking in my circles when I first became a yoga teacher. I feel like these questions weren't coming out enough back, almost 20 years ago now when I became a yoga teacher. And so I'm still in that space of learning and unlearning. And I love how Diane also explained the ways in which diet culture shows up, what she does when she sees it online. This is a place where you'll hear me learning in real time because I don't know if I've done that in the best way in the past. And then she also talks about how people interested in adopting Ayurvedic practices can learn and integrate them into their lives more safely. So I learned a lot in this conversation. I'm excited that you get to have a listen and learn along with me. So let's dive in. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Diane. It's so great to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I'm grateful for the invitation.
I'm really excited that we get to talk about all things Ayurveda, but with the eye on what's within the scope of practice. And also, hopefully, if we can talk a little bit about how this applies to orthorexia, because we haven't talked about that on the podcast. Maybe we can fit that all in. But before we do that, tell us, what's the work that you do and who do you do it for?
I have been the department chair for the Maryland University of Integrative Health since 2016. I've recently retired and I've been teaching Ayurveda at the university as well. I just graded my last papers last week, and in about a month, my husband and I will move to Portugal.
Oh my gosh, what's that feeling like with all that change, especially around retirement?
Holy smoke. I mean, it's interesting because anyone who knows me will know that I have been, Ayurvedically, I'm Pitta Vata, and I am very used to, as most Americans are actually, because every country, every nationality kind of has its flavor. And I like to do things. I've never met an idea I didn't like, and then I like to put them into practice. So the notion that now I'm on my own means I can either run amok or will be frustrated because there's no one for whom to create things. We'll see.
Right. I'm thinking if you're anything like me, and I have a feeling, because we have similar doshas, I have a feeling you will not be bored. You'll find something different to do.
Everyone in my life says that. They say, you're not going to sit around long. No, dust is growing. No, you are not going to have moss under your rolling stone.
So true. So true. Okay. Well, you'll have to keep us posted on how that goes. So what do you think? Well, first of all, can you sort of define what Ayurveda is? When someone says that they are an Ayurveda, blah, 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 what are the different ways that people can be sharing Ayurveda out into the world? Let's start there.
Okay. So Ayurveda is the traditional medicine of India. That is what it is. And it is considered a sister science to yoga. In India, because let's go back to where it comes from. In India, there are separate practitioners. There are people who do yoga therapy. All yoga in India is applied like yoga therapy. Ayurveda is often brought into those interventions because it all goes together. And boy, I could go off, if you want, into British colonialism and how that altered Ayurveda. Would you like that? Okay.
Yeah.
So as you know, India was colonized by Britain in the late 1700s. They were also colonized by the Portuguese and Dutch earlier, which altered some structures in Indian life and the way the people engaged with their own culture. Now, when the Brits came in, they really, really changed things. And one of the ways that things changed under British colonization is Western medicine was pushed to the front, and anything that had Sanskrit was disallowed. Can't chant. You're not supposed to use any Sanskrit anywhere. So this whole spiritual, medical side of Indian culture was stripped and considered second class, inferior, just above witchcraft. It was all pushed. Now, it wasn't until I'm going to say, I'm bad with dates, but the 1940s, I think 47 or 48, that India gained independence. And even though the Indians gained independence from Britain, they were still infected, shall we say, by Western culture. And even though Gandhi had done so much to help people reclaim their memory of who they were in the early 20th century, there was still this false preference, let's say, for Western medicine as the only thing that could actually help people. The education system works differently in India. Here, we choose what school we want to go to, and we apply to that school in North America. In India, you decide you want to be a thing, a doctor, a teacher, and you apply to the government. And the government will decide based on your grades and your position and your means which school you will be eligible to go to for that profession. So here's what happened. So people started to claim Sanskrit back, and in the 60s, everyone wanted to be a doctor in India. And they started pulling Ayurveda back into medical schools, but it was still being looked at as a second-class profession. So what was happening was people who applied to medical school in India, if there weren't enough seats or their grades weren't good enough, they may be offered a seat in Ayurvedic doctor school, and they would be allowed to do BAMS training. So, I mean, to me, it's super interesting how colonization can alter can alter a whole culture and an entire country and a way that things happen in that country in ways that are hard to get back. So there's been a change in the way Ayurveda is practiced in India. There are some people who still do the old ways, who know Dravya Guna, the herbal medicine, who know how to do panchakarma, who know how to do correct dietary regimens. But, it's different there. And now let's talk about Ayurveda in the U.S. or in North America, in Canada and the U.S. Holy smoke. I mean, if Indian practitioners came here and looked at what we're doing here, they'd go, what exactly is this? What are you doing?
Right.
Don't you know the Sanskrit terms? Don't you, because who knows Sanskrit here? I mean, some of us know transliterated Sanskrit, and we know it as an orally, but we can't gain a lot of the knowledge of it because, one, most of us aren't sitting at teachers' feet. Most of us are learning it in yoga programs, and it has a place, I think, in a yoga program. I think it can be really helpful for assessment and for helping us to understand how to be with the people we're working with. Knowing a little about Ayurvedic psychology can help you find a way to present a plan of care to someone you're working with that will be agreeable to them and help them connect to it in a way that means something to them. So I think that there are assessment elements that are really valuable in Ayurveda, but a lot of people they're, I think, working, let's say, beyond their scope.
So let's talk about that. Oh, sorry. I feel
go
like
ahead,
I'm
please. Go
interrupting.
ahead. Please.
So first, I mean, I get what you're saying because I think a lot of people are working with outside of their scope of practice.
Mm-hmm.
I often say on the podcast, like, unless you are a yoga teacher who is also trained in nutrition through a disordered eating lens, like you have some education in there, just please stop talking to people about food. And then people will say to me, well, wait a second. I study Ayurveda, so I get to talk to people about food, and I get how it gets a little murky there. Do you have some clarity around that?
Yeah, yes, there are. So one of the issues with Ayurveda in North America is it's not a licensed profession. And because, like yoga, we are dealing with a profession that is outside of licensure, there are a lot of, it's like the Wild West.
Right.
And really, I think what I would say too is buyer beware. So if you are a person looking for Ayurvedic care from a qualified practitioner, you should be looking for certain things, not just saying, oh, my pal got training in a yoga program and I'm going to go to them for Ayurvedic care. You may not be getting the best care. There are a couple of different organizations that are doing registries and certifications similar to what Yoga Alliance does for yoga teachers.
Okay.
And at least that's something, So the National Ayurvedic Medical Association, NAMA, has a few tiers of scopes of practice for those tiers of practitioners, and you can apply and they'll check your credentials and make sure you've had appropriate training for the different tiers of scope. And what is a scope of practice? A scope of practice is a set of agreements about what you can and cannot do. Nurses have a certain scope of practice. Doctors have a certain scope of practice. Dentists, most healthcare professionals. It's a term we use with healthcare practitioners. And you don't want your dental hygienist putting a filling in for you. Right. That's out of her or his scope of practice. That's not what they've been trained to do. So when you're seeing someone, you want to make sure they have been appropriately trained for this scope of practice. Now, there are other organizations besides NAMA. There's the Association of Ayurvedic Professionals of North America. There's another, primarily, I'm trying to think of their name, I think it's just Ayurvedic Professionals of North America. They're a good organization. They are primarily Indian professionals with BAMS degrees in India who have come to the US and become Western medical doctors. So they've really got that integrative overlap. And they are really working to teach people about Ayurveda. The biggest organization in North America for those of us who are not getting licensure as medical doctors would probably be NAMA. And they have Ayurvedic health coach, Ayurvedic practitioner, Ayurvedic doctor. So those would be the three scopes, if you will. And the health coach can assess and educate. They can teach general principles about Ayurveda. They can help people understand how to choose seasonally appropriate foods, how to notice what's happening with them. The Ayurvedic practitioner can go a little further and can work with digestive issues. So it's not so much, in my mind, about giving a protocol or a dietary regimen to someone, but it's helping them understand what's happening with their digestion and how to maximize and balance their digestive system. And now when you get up to an Ayurvedic doctor, they can diagnose and treat. An Ayurvedic doctor can diagnose and treat. A practitioner, still assessing and educating, because these are people who are not licensed. And I don't know about Canada, but in North America, if you are not in a health freedom state and you are saying that you are an Ayurvedic practitioner who's diagnosing and treating, you could run into a problem with being fined with practicing medicine without a license.
Okay.
So there are repercussions, not just for the client getting poor care, but the person who is practicing it really getting in some legal trouble.
Right. Okay. This is all good information. So how does this tie in? This is where you and I started talking. I mean, I'll just tell you, I'll be really honest. I saw this post on social media. It's a great place if you really want to get like ticked off in a hurry about diet culture, especially.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw this post of someone who has quite a large following. I don't want to point fingers because I think we're all learning, sharing like how this particular brand of milk is better than all other brands of milk. And then there was just this slew of comments and people asking more questions. And I just thought, this is dangerous. This is really, I feel like the education is not there, that this person posting it does not understand the harm that could be happening in this post. So then I reached out to you and we started to talk about orthorexia. Do you want to define what that is? And
So I'll tell you where I came up. I've been talking about this for 15 years. When I was seeing some young people come to me who had trouble eating anyway, and then they had been to another Ayurvedic professional who, for instance, told one of them, who was of Vata constitution, who said to this young man, "This is what you have to eat in the morning. You have to soak 10 almonds, peel them, and have them with 2 figs." Well, what are you talking about? So now this kid is OCD about making sure they've soaked their almonds correctly, and if they don't do it right, well, then they won't eat anything. And so this is what I think of as orthorexia. Is I've been given this plan and I'm going to do it perfectly. And if I don't do it perfectly, I'm not going to do anything at all. Which, if you're already not eating well, now you've got this whole other layer of rules and junk on you. And diet culture has already put so many rules and weirdnesses in place on individuals that this is just one more flavor of eating disorder that can take hold.
right.
In my mind, when I'm working with people, what I'd rather do is help them understand the elemental energies that are who they are and what the elemental energies of the seasons are, and help them understand maybe appropriate quantities of food they should eat through the day. And then they should choose what makes them feel good. It's about, I guess I'm more like Janine Roth in that way, in that we need to understand and listen to our physical bodies. At MUIH, one of the key principles we work with is interoception. for the yoga therapy program. And what is interoception? It is understanding the cues that come up internally and being able to respond to them rather than react to them. So that includes signals, am I hungry or am I distressed? Am I having indigestion or am I hungry? Am I, what's happening in my body? And interoception requires the individual to be curious and mindful about their lived experience. And when a person can be curious and mindful about their lived experience, they can, in my opinion, better care for themselves because they have a deeper connection to self that's not narcissistic, if you will. It's simply about self-care. And I think that's something that is lacking in a lot of the ways people promote various plans of eating, regimens, there is a disconnect from the person actually being engaged with and paying attention to their own lived experience and what will ultimately serve them.
This is also good. For the yoga teachers who are listening, that interoception, like we learn that through doing yoga. If we have practiced with a teacher for a while, if we do our own practice at home. And there are a lot of people walking around on the planet who don't know what's going on in their bodies. I worked with a lot of people who had never done yoga when I worked at the physio office. And, just that knowing of like, okay, how are you feeling in this moment? Even I'll do the same thing. I go into a therapy appointment with my psychotherapist and she'll be like, okay, where are you feeling that in your body? And I realize, oh, I'm not. I'm just all up in my head about it. Yeah. Just hanging out there. So what are some of the things that you wish yoga teachers knew about orthorexia?
I think that what I wish people knew about and were willing to engage with is resisting the temptation to give diets, to give dietary regimens, and to make sure that they've got the correct training so it's not just about telling someone what to eat, it's about helping them understand how their digestion works and making sure that the individual is capable of caring for their digestive system. And as you may well know, and as we all know more now, and at least in the integrative health world, is that the digestive system has as much to do with mood, and it is really its own mood center. It's not all about the head. We'd like it all to be about our head.
We would make life a lot simpler.
It's not. So, what happens in our GI tract really impacts everything about how we feel, how we behave, how we can be with ourselves and others. So really being able to, it's not about brands of this or that. And it's not about, taking supplements. It's about understanding how this digestive system we have operates and being able to support it in doing its job. And really, in my opinion, if you go back to real Ayurveda, it's not about, sure, there's herbs. I was trained, the teacher that I learned with for years, would say that no one should take any herb for more than 3 months. If you're taking something for more than 3 months, it's not going to be effective anymore, and it's not, you're making your system dependent on it. And the whole point is to find balance and to allow your body and yourself to be what it is on its own.
Oh, that's really fascinating. I love that, especially because I see a lot of trends right now. I mean, you and I are recording this right near the end of the year. And so there's just this whole like, you need this supplement or this thing to like have a clearer brain or have better digestion or all the things. So this is good. Connected yoga teachers, I want to pop in here for a moment to tell you some OfferingTree news that is happening. So, OfferingTree is our podcast sponsor because I use and love their software. I was already telling yoga teachers about it all the time. But there are a couple of updates that I wanted to share with you that are connected with OfferingTree. So, one, if you have not seen, they released a huge update to their website page builder, which allows you to customize your website even more if you've built one with them, while still using templates that are created by a designer that knows what they're doing. So that means that you can choose a template to start with and then customize it with your brand colors, your photos, and all of the goodness that makes it uniquely you. The second thing I want to tell you about is that they're also sponsoring another podcast that I'm listening to and loving. It's called the Love of Yoga Podcast. It's hosted by Anjali Rao, and this podcast is presented by the Accessible Yoga Association. So if you're like me and you're already listening to the Accessible Yoga Podcast, where Jeevana Heyman and Amber Carnes were hanging out, then you already will have this showing up in your podcast feed. I love that OfferingTree is partnering with the Accessible Yoga organization and other yoga teachers who really care about making yoga accessible. So they've chosen to sponsor and support that podcast. Right now, I'm listening to the first episode of 2023, and it's all about the caste system. And I'm learning a lot. I'm realizing I didn't know about how prevalent the system of oppression is right now here in North America and around the world. So I'll make sure to link to that podcast in our show notes. In case you are thinking, I have more listening time right now. Some of you are listening more in the winter when the days are shorter. Maybe you're trying to get out and go for a walk. We can learn and listen together. So I'm excited that you're here now. And if you are looking for more podcasts, that's one that I highly recommend. I also really love in this episode the question of how can we practice yoga as allies of the caste abolition movement? How can we do that? How can we show up? It's a really great question that gets answered in this episode. I would love to know from you, what yoga podcasts are you listening to these days? If you want to share with me, you can send a voice message or tag me on social media. And if you are looking for software that is going to help you as a yoga teacher to build your website, send out newsletters, automate all the things that are Zoom links and all of that, waivers, payments, check out OfferingTree. And because you're a podcast listener, we have a discount for you over at offeringtree.com/Shannon. Now let's get back into our conversation with Diane about how we can see when diet culture is showing up and how we can get it out of our yoga and Ayurveda spaces. You know, the other thing I see out there is people sharing their meals, which is cool. Like I like when people take a picture of their food, but sometimes I see in the yoga, health and wellness world, people are sharing only the quote unquote, like what they define as healthy eating or clean eating or all the words that are out there. What are your thoughts on when we talk about what we're putting into our own bodies?
I think there's you know, especially with social media, there is such a pressure on us to perform and present in a certain way. And I grew up in theater, so, I understand that theater and radio. So, I was paid to be a certain way all day long, every day on the radio. So, I understand the pressure of that. However, um, needing to present as perfectly sattvic or I'm tridoshik or, none of that's nonsense. Um, maybe maybe you can one of the things with my teacher was if we went anywhere, we were supposed to bring our own butane burner and cook our own food if we were traveling, and we shouldn't fly in airplanes. And I understand all of that. And if I was going to, I suppose, live a perfectly sattvic life, I would walk everywhere. I would only drink cow's milk that I milked myself. I would never kill an animal. I would grow my own vegetables. I would have my own laying hens. But you know what? If I do that, I can't do anything else.
Yeah. Tell me about it. I used to have chickens like that in itself.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
I think, we are in an era where we need to make conscious decisions and conscious choices. And I feel it's freeing for our students, for ourselves, for everyone around us, to let people know that we are not perfect and that we, are making conscious choices to the best of our abilities, but we are not perfect. We don't expect anyone else to be perfect. And, we honor imperfection. There's a wonderful book, I can't think of the author now, called The Spirituality of Imperfection. And I think it might have saved my life. Someone gave it to me in some time ago. And, initially I was like, what is this? And then I thought, oh, this is so good. Because, we're all here with some curriculum. We're all here with something we're supposed to do, I believe. And we need to do it mindfully and well. But we can't pretend we're someone other than who we are. It's
Right.
a lot of pressure to present a certain way all the time. And we can get trounced and mean-girled and stuff if we show our human side, our humanity. However, for those who care about us and for those who work with us and for those who train with us, being able to show that we're 360-degree human beings and we make mistakes and we can say, I'm sorry, and we eat cake sometimes is, I think, healthy.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree. I found some great nutritionists online who I follow who are against diet culture, who I love when they're talking about different things. They're like eating Oreos, or there's some influencers who I follow who are showing like, this is what a perfect photo looks like, but guess what I'm not showing you? Like, here are my stretch marks. And I love it when people show up and say, like, what you're watching here on the social media platform just isn't reality. So I'm super curious about your teacher who said you couldn't fly. And it sounds like you came to this place where you're like, yeah, that's what my teacher is saying, but I'm not following all of that. Can you talk about what that was like because sometimes that can be tough.
Oh, it was, and I honor my teacher, and I'm not going to talk about who that was because that would not be correct. So I just decided that I can't, I can't do it perfectly. Many of the people with whom I trained and who are still engaged in the community are striving for that sort of cosmically perfect existence. And I'm, I, I can't, I just can't do it.
Yeah.
Or maybe I could, and maybe I would become enlightened, but I wonder if I'd miss some of the curriculum I came here for. Did I come here to get enlightened, or did I come here for some other reason? Did I come here to create a different set of lessons that will take me in another life to enlighten? I don't know. I mean, I'm not clear that that's my path this time around. It might be eventually, but not right now.
Right.
There are things I feel like we are meant to experience in this world. And, as a recovering alcoholic and addict, I'll just say that, I already feel like I've done a lot. Um, and I don't want to get addicted to other paths, you know? I
Oh,
don't
I
want to get
love
it.
how you said this because this can come in so much in the yoga world. I've seen
Yeah.
it over and over again. That sort of like addictive personality can transfer over. And I feel like it can when we're looking at like, I only eat this way, I only do this thing. Yeah.
I think people create a lot of more suffering for themselves than they need.
Right.
And that's such a Western cultural thing that, suffering leads to enlightenment. Well, sure, tapas. You need tapas. You need some austerity. You need whatever, but I don't need to wear a hair shirt and beat myself. I don't need to only eat kind bars all day in order to be, whatever. I don't need to buy a product or endorse a brand or, that's just not it. It's not it. You missed the point. The point is to be free, in my opinion. The point is to be free, to be liberated. And if I'm counting almonds, I'm not free.
Right. You and I talked about before I hit record. And this is always what happens when we get chatting about the topic before. I'm not sure if you used the word agency, but you talked
I
about,
did.
okay, it was agency. Tell us about that, like how we can bring this in if we're teaching yoga or if we're sharing Ayurveda or if somewhere we're in sharing these practices. How do we encourage agency with our students?
So it's about the relationship. One of the things I really like about MUIH is their focus on what they call healing presence. And healing presence is founded in therapeutic relationship, which has to do with the ability to self reflect, the ability to reflect on your relationship with peers, and your ability to reflect on your relationship with those who come to you for services, let's say. So we are always in relationship. Sometimes we're in peer relationships, sometimes we're in up down relationships, we're either up or down, or sometimes we're, looking at relationship with self. Where all three of those overlap is where healing presence lives, the ability to accurately reflect on what's happening in all three of those domains. And if we want to do something that's other than a Western medical relationship, which is always up down with the deliverer of the thing in the up position and everyone receiving care in the down position, then we've got to change the way we are with people. So when we come into our classes, our um, our appointments, however we're working with people, with that notion of we're going to engage in a relationship that allows the other person to have choices and have agency in their own care, then we can get somewhere with them. They can get somewhere with themselves, and everyone can heal more deeply, in my opinion. So, for instance, it's the difference between, do I come to somebody and I say, I'm the expert, this is what I see, and this is what you have to do. Go home and do it. You've just taken all their agency away. You're telling them that they don't know anything about themselves. You know it all about them, and you're going to tell them what to do. So it's more helpful to ask people what they are working toward and help them reach their goals and to give them choices and look for their preferences while you're working with them. So sometimes our preferences get us into trouble, but sometimes they're false preferences because we're unaware of other things that may be more helpful, more nourishing, more whatever. Um, so I think it's about, really always keeping the student in mind, always keeping the client in mind, and always keeping the client or the student's needs in mind rather than your own, or your own idea of the regimen you want to present them, or the class you're going to teach them, or the thing you're going to show them because it's so cool. That's not really pertinent. What they need should be the foremost thing. And then you help them, you work with them to discover together what it is that's going to get them where they need to go.
It's super important to also note that through the years of working with people, a lot of people are asking for you to tell them, like, tell me what to do, hold me accountable to this, like, or this comes out all the time in yoga class. People will be saying to me, where should I be feeling this? And so I just turn it around. Where are you feeling this? Like,
absolutely.
And it can be easy to also, once you get a little experience, I think, you think, well, I've seen this before. I know what's going on with this person. But each person is so unique that we really don't until we get looking at that individual.
Oh, yeah. And that's where, rather than coming from a place of understanding and certainty, you have to keep curiosity foremost. Instead of going, oh, I see this thing in that person and it must be XYZ, instead to inquire of the student, tell me about what's happening with you right now in here. And then you can find out, always find out before you decide you're going to do something with that person. And this is, I've had my big teacher for yoga screwed up my SI joint and triangle because of a decision that was made about the way I was in the pose, and came up behind me and adjusted me.
Right.
So and that person had been teaching for, 30 years.
Right.
You don't know. You don't always know. You just don't know. You cannot let your ego take over. Mm-mm.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's such a good reminder. If yoga teachers who are listening want to learn more, if they feel like they want to dive more into Ayurveda in a way that isn't causing more harm through diet culture or like regiments or all of that, where do you suggest that they go? Like, if someone walked up to you on the street, what yoga school or what organization would you put top of mind for people?
There are a couple that I think do a really good job. I still like the Ayurvedic Institute in Albuquerque, Vasant Lad School. He also created 3 textbooks that I feel are very good. I use them at MUIH. I feel like and this is going to be U.S. based because I'm in the U.S., sorry.
That's okay. Lots of our listeners are.
Okay. The Himalayan Institute in Honesdale, Pennsylvania, I think does a very nice job. Not far from them is the Arsha Vidya Gurukulam, which occasionally has some interesting programs in Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania. A colleague does a program out of Mount Madonna in California. So if you're on the other coast, that I think has a pretty credible program, as does the California College of Ayurveda, Mark Halpern's place. I think they do. It's a little different. It's a little more clinical, if you will, but they're, I think, on track with what they're doing. Unfortunately, Bastir, who had a degree in Ayurveda, is no longer, I don't think they're offering that anymore in Washington. But those are the ones that I think do a great job. There was a doctor named Sunil Joshi who was down in New Mexico too, who really was a wise person and often took people to India. David Frawley and Dr. Lad, I think, were both taking people to Pune at different times. So there's an opportunity to do things like that through their leadership scholarship,
Okay.
tutelage.
Nice.
Yeah.
If our listeners have other ideas, they can put them in the show notes. We'll talk I'll talk about that in the outro of like
Yeah.
where to find those when this comes out. And uh my last question, because I can't believe how the time has flown. I feel like I could talk to you for hours. My last question here is, what do you think, as you've been learning about Ayurveda and as you've been teaching about it, what has been something that has really either impacted you or the people that you work with, where it's just one small thing maybe, um, where you've seen it really make a big impact in someone's life?
Mm. I- there's so many things. It's hard to take just one thing. I don't know. For me, it's not just diet. It's not just movement. For me, it's mantra. Um, Nothing has been able to still my mind like doing japa. I know there's a big and I want to say that mindfulness and mantra and japa, so kirtan, japa, and mindfulness are all different things,
Yes.
and they all come from different streams of our various schools of thought. And for me, a japa japa has changed my ability to be with myself in the world. And if I can get my head to be still, then I can make choices that are in my best interest. And I can listen carefully and with curiosity to what's going on around me. But until I can get my head still, I can't do much else. So the combination of a japa japa followed by either walking or yoga is really what I need to do to stay well.
Right.
And that's changed, I think, a lot of people I've worked with too, is just having a mantra to focus on when the going gets tough and having some easy to engage with physical activity.
Right. Well, this is fantastic. I love that you shared that because I feel like it opens some more doors, that it's not just like, you know, move like this for an hour and then all will be solved in the world,
Mm-mm.
in your
You know,
world.
I started off when I started teaching yoga, the two populations I began with were seniors and pregnant women.
Mhm.
And it was never, you could never do any protocol. You couldn't, because all the bodies were all so different. And especially with the seniors, be like, what should I do? And I'd say, just get down on the ground and roll around, just get on the ground and stretch and see what feels good, and practice getting on the ground and getting off the ground. That's really all that matters. And they were like, what? But, now that I'm moving more toward the age I started teaching after 30 years of teaching, um, really, that's really still what we need to do, is just, what does your body want? What does your precious body want and need? Give it what it wants and needs. Don't hurt it. Don't force it. Just be with it. Let it be.
This has been so good. I'll make sure to link to, well, maybe if you're retired, you're like, I'm not going to have, you can't link, you can't follow me anywhere. Is that the way it's going to be?
Well, people can. I have a Facebook page. Do
Okay.
I? I mean, personal Facebook page that I don't do a whole lot. I have a LinkedIn page.
There you go.
I'm on Instagram. I do the things.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll link to those so people can follow you and we can continue this conversation. Okay, I said that was the last question, but I have one more actually. If you were to see, what do you do when you see this show up in the world? When someone says, I'm an Ayurvedic practitioner here in North America, and you see them sharing things that look steeped in diet culture, do you just keep scrolling and think, do you say something in the comments? What do you do there?
You know, I I keep walking.
Yeah.
I keep walking because I trust the universe. If someone is coming up to me and trying to tell me or one of my students what to do, I will create a correction. But especially in social media, I often don't do much of anything because what's at my place? What's at my place to tell someone else what to do? And I'm not gonna, if there's a tsunami of ignorance, what's one voice going to do?
Right. Oh my gosh, this is so good. So good. I went into that comment section and did something and they're like said something and like thought I was providing something helpful, but it wasn't really well received. And then I thought, you know what? Let's just do a podcast on it instead and
Yeah.
like talk about it.
Yeah. Resist the temptation, go with advisement into situations where your opinion, your opinion is going to be other than or unwelcome. So sometimes you can ask a question or encourage some thoughtfulness in another direction, but you're not going to change anything.
Right.
Especially in social media, you're not going to change anything. I'm not. Maybe you are. I'm not going to change anything.
No, I think you're very wise. I appreciate your answer. I feel like I'm soaking it in here. So I thank you so much for your time today. And I want to hear how your retirement goes because I feel like we all could use some tips on how to transition into that. And I'm curious also then, how do you use Ayurveda when you're changing things that much? So we'll have to have you back.
Thank you. I'd be delighted. It's been lots of fun.
All right. Thank you so much. Huge thank you, Diane, for all of your amazing insights into today's episode and our conversation. I am super grateful. I'm excited to hear from you and how retirement goes and how that transition feels. Keep us posted for sure. Connected yoga teachers, I would love to hear from you. What are your thoughts after hearing this interview? What are your questions now? How are you looking at things differently around yoga and Ayurveda and our scope of practice as a yoga teacher? And especially let me know if you're looking at something online and you think, oh, this is exactly what Diane was talking about today or Shannon was mentioning. This is diet culture showing up. It's everywhere once you start to see it. As an example, over the holidays, we were hanging out with different friends, family members, and someone in the extended family was saying, oh, like it was right around New Year's Eve. Oh, I don't know if I should have that cheesecake because I don't know if that's healthy. And I was like, you know what? All food is good. Like, enjoy it. We're all here together. Let's not think about, oh, I'm only going to eat this specific amount of things or whatever. Like, let's enjoy this. Let's enjoy this cheesecake together. And this person is a teenager. And I just feel like that's the message I wish I would have received at different family functions throughout the years. There was a lot of diet culture showing up into our holiday celebrations, and I didn't know that. So I made mention of like that's diet culture showing up. It's this whole New Year thing, and we're probably still experiencing this if you're listening anywhere in January when this podcast episode is being released. But let's keep peeling back the layers here of diet culture and how it's sitting in our own brains, how it's showing up around us, and especially in our yoga spaces. If you are enjoying the podcast, one thing that I will ask you right now is, can you please just press pause, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. It is okay if you have some feedback for the podcast. I'd love to hear it. You can leave that in the review or you can send that to me at any point if you think, hey, here's something that you might have missed, or here's something that I would prefer while I'm listening to the podcast. I'm open to feedback for sure, and definitely open to you sharing how the podcast is supporting you because it helps other people find the podcast. So head over to iTunes and leave a review. You can do that also from our show notes page, which is over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/307. There's a button there on that page, on every show notes page, that says leave a review. And you can also share comments and questions right in our show notes at the very bottom of the page. We read those and we love to hear from you on how this episode landed and what thoughts you have. We also hang out in the Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group and have conversations in there about podcast episodes. So feel free to also share your thoughts and questions in there if you want to have more of a conversation. Now, if you want to hang out in real time, then for this month especially, and next month, January and February, where I live in Canada, winter is here and it is gray, and sometimes my roads are closed where I live, or it's snowing a lot. So it is online where we can hang out. And right now it's inside of Pelvic Health Professionals, which is a membership. It's kind of like Netflix. You can join at any point, you can leave at any point, but it is much more focused on how can we support our yoga students who have a pelvis and may have issues coming up with the pelvis and all that is connected to that. So I'm really excited because at the end of this month, January the 30th of 2023, I'm going to be hosting a 1-hour Fuel Your Business Q&A call. So we are going to talk about all the things about how we can keep going as business owners, as entrepreneurs who are also teaching yoga. I get asked a lot, how do you do this, Shannon? How do you run 2 businesses? How do you show up in your email? How do you post a podcast every week? And so I'm going to be there answering the questions from all of you. So feel free to join. You can jump in for that call. You can submit your questions. You can ask them live. We hang out on Zoom. It's a lot of fun. Then on February the 13th, we have a guest expert coming in. Brittany Sharp McCollum is going to come in and talk about birth positions. So if you teach prenatal yoga, postnatal yoga, baby and me yoga, yoga to people who are pregnant, if you're interested in any way about people who are giving birth and the positions that you can integrate even into your yoga practices or into the workshops that you're leading for this group of people, come and hang out and find out. Or maybe you're, soon to be birthing yourself, or if you want to support a friend, or if you're a doula. There are lots of uses for this 1-hour workshop that we're going to do with Brittany. I'm really excited about it. So to join any of those calls, or to get access to the training that's in there, or there's a 6-week Yoga for Pelvic Health series, all of the resources in there, you'll get access right away. That's over at pelvichealthprofessionals.com. Also, I'm hanging out on Instagram because I'm trying to get out for a daily walk every single day because, as some of you know, if you're returning listeners, the winter is challenging for me. And if I get outside, it makes it better. But I'll tell you what, I do not feel like it. I'm recording this in the morning and I'm thinking, I haven't gotten out for my daily walk yet. How am I going to motivate myself to do that? One thing that I do find very helpful is I post it in my Instagram stories. I love to take photos of nature. I love to just share my walk. And there are a lot of friends who I have on Instagram who are like, Shannon, did you get out for your walk today? Or I got out for my walk today, and it really helps to motivate me. So if you're in the same boat, you're having trouble getting outside, and you feel like you need a little pick-me-up through the winter months, or at any point, come and walk with me, and I'll link to my Instagram in the show notes. I also want to thank our amazing team as I'm talking about the show notes. So Crunch is our show notes writer who is traveling as she's writing. She's amazing. Make sure to check out our team page to see her and everyone else on our team. So Suzanne is doing the audio engineering of this podcast episode. She makes us all sound better than we sound all the time in real life. Thank you so much, Suzanne. And Sinead, a big hug goes out to Sinead this month for doing all of the work to support our community. Thank you also to you, dear listener, because you make this podcast possible. You're here all the way to the end. I really appreciate your time. sometimes I think, am I just like doing episode after episode where we're really challenging some of the harmful language that can show up in the yoga world? Sometimes I feel like, oh, where are the episodes where we just like talk about how to, I don't know, strengthen our hamstrings a little bit more or do something that isn't so complex. I mean, that still is complex. Let's face it. Every topic that we can talk about in the yoga and business world is really nuanced and really complex. And it involves having conversations. I think, you can't, everything that's in today's episode right now, we could not fit into a quick Facebook post or an email. And so it means so much to me that you are here having a listen, being part of this, and really interested in how we can make sure that our yoga spaces and the Ayurveda spaces are helping people and not causing harm. So just thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here and listening to the podcast. Share it with a friend if they are, interested at all in yoga, Ayurveda, or stomping out diet culture. Now, I'm super curious to know, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?